Black Rifle Coffee, baby. Breeding fuel.
So I'm trying to figure out the evolution of Jeff Woo. Do you like Geoffrey? Is that what you like to be called? Is
My
that
friends all call me Jeff.
I know, right?
But
So how come
I like the long form Geoffrey when it's in print. It looks more.
Really?
It looks
It's more branding.
It looks more, I guess, like formal,
Okay.
fancy.
Yeah. Okay.
My friends call me Jeff.
Yeah, because I was asking what's his name?
Devin.
I was asking Devin. I was like, what's the YouTube channel? It's like Geoffrey. I was like, oh shit, have I been like offending him for
No.
like calling him?
I think it just looks more formal. It looks more prestigious.
Yeah. Okay.
Like Geoffrey Chaucer, right? Like I get to compare myself to like a famous English writer.
Right.
Versus
Okay.
like Jeff, Like
yeah. It's
casual.
like that's a more casual, I guess, shortened version. How did you find yourself here though? Like from a circumstance of like where you came from to this table, like how did you find yourself here?
How did you? Why are you here?
I want to know. Yeah, but this is my show. People know why I'm here.
Yeah.
Like, how did you get here? Like, I mean, this is the topic that we're going to start with.
Yeah. Born and raised in Los Angeles, California. Ended up being in some sense a very stereotypical Asian American kid. So I was like very good at school. Was straight up winning math competitions, doing science fairs. I actually had like the highest scoring SAT score in America as an 8th grader.
Are you serious?
Yeah, like that's like a one random fact. But I scored 1590 out of 1600 as an 8th grader.
Are you serious?
And like, funnily enough, the 790 was in math, not writing or English. Like
right.
I read a lot. I was just like a book nerd. And I think in some sense, a part of me would have been like a computer science professor or philosopher. I feel like 49% of me would be very introverted and very academic, like just like reading books, solving problems, doing for like just the joy of learning and solving little puzzles, right? Like what is academia but solving intellectual abstract puzzles? But I think when I went to study computer science at Stanford, and my dad was an entrepreneur, I think the idea of starting your own business was just like very possible. And when I talk to friends now, when they say like, how are you doing? How do you become a founder of a $1 billion brand? How are you a public listed company CEO? I think we all have our journeys of like how to even be a founder or an entrepreneur.
Right.
But I think for me, it's just seeing what my dad did. It just seemed possible for like, I think a lot of people just see, you emulate your parents, right? Like, they're a doctor, they're a lawyer, they're a plumber, right? Like that's kind of the world that you expect to kind of fall into, and maybe you pivot a little bit around that, the adjacent knowledge of like the community.
Right.
So I think to me, it was just like running and being your own boss is always possible. That American dream story for my dad was, from Hong Kong, and then came to study physics at UCLA as like an 18, 19-year-old, and then building his own business was like, okay, like that is possible.
So he came to study physics.
Yeah.
And then did he get his PhD, or was he like on the PhD track?
Yeah, he was going to do his PhD in high energy physics, and then dropped out to help start the family business, where this was in the 70s where globalization was just opening up.
Right.
So it's just like China was a closed, straight up communist society moving towards more of a perestroika and like an opening of like the markets, right? And then Hong Kong was that hub of goods and services flowing from mainland China through Hong Kong to the United States. So he caught that initial globalization wave of just importing. I mean, I don't think he'll be offended, but like cheap toys.
Right.
And like seasonal goods.
Yeah, because wasn't it in and around like holiday stores or something like that? Like, or holiday goods specifically around season?
Yeah, basically like in some sense, like manufacturing and labor costs, especially at the time in China, was very, very low. And like, how would you build a supply chain just to make Easter baskets or like Christmas toys or Halloween costumes? You can't really do that all year round unless you just have like a whole portfolio of this type of stuff and just like really fast supply chain of going up and down in terms of like switching SKUs.
Hmm.
So I think they were just early on that bandwagon. And then secondly, I think he just saw like a community of these Chinese Americans doing this, but they were just basically like he would have stories where they would ship 1 or 2 crates for the season, flip it for a couple $100,000, put it in your pocket, and you're done for the year.
Right.
And my dad was like, "Well, why don't I just do this all the fucking time?"
Right.
So like,
Right.
so it was like he just like wanted to take it one step further. So he just instead of just a seasonal, you work really hard for 3 months out of the year, he just started doing this 24/7. And then as he compounded that business, he became, supply to the big box retailers, the Walmarts, Targets of the world. Like we own one of the top Halloween costume manufacturers. So like, I don't know if you've seen like the meme of like the UPS dog costume.
Of course, yeah.
Like that's our costume. Like we have like
Really?
the UPS license and stuff. So like all those like weird things that you don't expect. Like
Yeah.
who owns that? Who made that happen? Like yeah, that's my family's business. But I think what I thought was also really cool there was that during that time, downtown Los Angeles was, I mean, now it's kind of shitty again now with all the homeless and crime, but I think especially during the time in the 70s and 60s, there's just like nothing there. But he needed a bunch of warehouse space to like store like,
Right.
these containers and containers of stuff.
Right.
So our family just bought a lot of real estate in downtown LA. So I feel like that was like the second big play that he made. Like one play was just like this globalization train, just trading goods and services from like a lower labor cost of goods market to a higher cost market, right? And the second thing that I thought was interesting was that you just caught like the big real estate wealth transfer for
Right.
downtown LA, but just also just all of American land was just like pretty cheap 30, 40, 50 years ago. You
Right.
just bought any of this stuff, you'd be really rich now.
Yeah. Right.
So you just, I think looking back, I don't think he thought he was a genius. I think he just needed to like store containers of stuff. So he just bought a lot of this stuff. And now we're converting a lot of that stuff into like, multi-unit, multi-family, like residences and commercial spaces. So like, if you got people are familiar with the Arts District in LA, which is one of the coolest neighborhoods in LA, there's like this building called the Gary Building, which is a 320 unit multi-family apartment complex that we own. And like JP Morgan was like our minority partner on the deal, and we like bought them out and all this stuff, right? So it's just like I think I got really early exposure to business and entrepreneurship, but also just like I think a very blue collar work ethic in which to do that.
Right.
Because I think my dad would have stories where he didn't know how to get like a bank loan. There's no venture capitalist at the time, right?
Right.
Like there's no VC dollars, and then like when he applied for his first bank loan, like the bank teller was like, "Hey, you need to have like a P&L statement and
Right.
balance sheet." He didn't even know what it was.
Yeah.
He was like a physics PhD dropout, but he didn't know
Yeah.
what a balance sheet was. He had to like apparently like go look at the like
Well, and there's no
library.
YouTube. It's not like you're going to be able to.
Yeah, I
like,
think he like literally went to
search,
the
right?
library and it's like,
Yeah.
"Yo, how do you like
Right.
make a balance sheet in P&L?" So I think I got like a lot of that like kind of the immigrant blue collar work ethic hustle of just like grinding it up with no institutional or prestigious kind of like the know-how of like what I felt like I got from Stanford,
Yeah.
right? So I was like just good at school. I used to be more humble about like saying or not saying that, but I think like there's so many people that like are just like not actually good at school. I feel like I need to like make being smart at school cool again. Because like it's like
Yeah.
like just math genius are like just humble about it. And it's like people are great at sports, people are great at like video games, but like hey, like I think it's cool to be actually good at school.
Well, there's like a narrative that, well, it's not like there is a narrative out there, which is the traditional academic route is essentially worthless. You've heard it.
Yep.
Well, like, what's your perception of this?
Raw IQ and being smart is always useful, right? Like maybe you don't have like the best prestigious like academic training, but you're fucking smart, right? Like Evan Hafer IQ is high. So I think to me, the badges of school is really just a work product of being smart. So you don't need to have the badges. It's like a signal of being smart.
Right.
So I think Like there are plenty of successful multi-billionaires who didn't have great academic track records, but the vast majority of them were really strong academically, right? You can say, oh, is Mark Zuckerberg like not a good academic person? No. He dropped out of Harvard,
Right.
right? It's not like he was a college dropout. No, he
He
got
jumped out
into,
of Harvard.
yeah, like he was a very good student, right? Like Jeff Bezos was crushing it at Princeton.
Yeah, who another guy, by the way, who started physics, shifted to computer
science,
science, and then dropped out, right?
Yeah, like
Or did he
Elon,
finish? I can't remember.
no,
Did
he finished.
Yeah, he did. He did.
Yeah, he was a quant trader at DE
Yeah.
Shaw, which is like a high frequency like algo trading firm, which I thought was like the coolest thing ever when I was like a high school student. I wanted to like do algo trading. Like,
Really?
yeah, like I was being recruited by DE Shaw, the same company that Jeff Bezos worked at. I was super deep into like systems programming, like C++. My computer science advisor was this guy named David Sheraton. If you Google him, he's like one of the OG billionaire Stanford CS professors. He was like the first angel investor in Google. He started he started Arista Network, which was like a multi-billion-dollar router switch network.
Right.
So like it's very interesting, that guy, because he's like this Canadian dude who like was very contrarian. Like he hated all the AI people. So he would do his like research group meetings in the AI lab. So he'd be like, we're in the enemy territory watching all these
Like, why do you hate AI people? Like, how is that, like, the cultural differences? Like, why does it even exist?
So I came up through this, like, this is going to be just pretty academically computer
Please, yeah,
science,
yeah.
but so I would say that a lot of original computer scientists end up in this path called like distributed systems or systems engineering.
Mhm.
And this new generation, I don't know if it's new, but like this current generation of like what people are doing, OpenAI, Anthropic, all these multi-billion-dollar companies, these are essentially statistical mathematical methods to predict the next token or the next. These are basically statistical models, like math equations. And I think what Sheraton always had an issue with is that they're not very explainable, right? You basically do a lot of matrix algebra calculations and an answer spits out. And he always had the problem that when humans make decisions, we could have a reason for why a decision is being made. And he was always skeptical that, hey, because all these matrix algebra calculations were happening, and the chat GPT says, you know, Evan is going to be a billionaire or he's not going to be a billionaire. It's like, why? So that was like his academic philosophical difference there. And so I think he just always wanted to be like amongst the enemy to like just see what's going on that perspective. And he always had this notion that everything needed to be explainable to be deployable in the real world. But I think in some sense, like, I think that notion is probably wrong in some sense, that I don't think humans even understand why we're making decisions. Like, I think if you just do MRI scans, it becomes clear that our limbic system makes a decision, and our neocortex, which is our more advanced brain, interprets that decision and then tells you a story of why you made that decision. So basically, I think like the argument around explainability doesn't even really hold for humans, which is that we kind of emotionally respond and make a decision, and our neocortex makes up a story, makes up a rational, logical story of why you even made the decision in the first place. So I think it's like no one understands how the brain actually works, but I think this, like, I don't have a strong academic opinion on this, but I think it's just like, I just know from a Sheraton perspective, like what I learned from him was that, like, I don't know, being contrarian and like being amongst enemies is kind of a fun. I felt like he was kind of a troll.
Oh yeah.
Like I think
Okay.
he was like a billionaire, bearded Canadian professor troll who liked poking fun. And I think that's oftentimes like the best academics and the best entrepreneurs are like that. Like, you're not afraid to troll a little bit and be creative and have fun.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that there's I think to break paradigms, right? To be disruptive, you actually have to be a contrarian. You have to want to kind of go out and go against the grain, and it has to be fun. I also think that it takes I think that it takes a smarter, more competent, and more confident person to go out and do it.
Yep.
Because if you don't have the confidence and the intelligence to couple together in order to do it successfully, you're going to fucking fail, because then it's interpreted, and or you're going to make moves that it's like a chess game, for instance. Like, you can be as smug and as arrogant as you want if you know that you're just going to stuff everybody at the table.
Yep.
But the second you actually sit down to play, if you just get hammered, it doesn't really matter. You're just an arrogant asshole at that
Yep.
point. You're actually a dumb, arrogant asshole.
Yep.
So there's a huge difference, right?
Yep.
Like, to be successful and to live somewhat legendary in that, you actually have to have all of those traits, and they have to fall in together.
Yeah. No, you have to bring the goods.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
on the margin, if you want to troll a little bit, like, that's great. I
Yeah.
think that's probably selects for like trolliness is probably like a good category. And I think that just reminds me of, one of my closest friends and business partners, Jake Paul. I think is
Yeah.
like a great personification of like being like an ultimate troll, but like low key, I think he's actually just like very commercial, smart, genius level marketer and operator. But anyways, it's not to skip around too much, but I think why, like, how do I even land here? I mean, I think, long story short, started a company right out of school, sold that company to Groupon right before I turned 24.
Right.
So made my first kind of real money fairly early in like a typical Silicon Valley startup
Right.
trajectory. So I had to start investing in my friends' companies, and got lucky in a couple of good positions there. But also just got really into biohacking and like
Yeah, that
fasting,
was like
keto, all of that stuff.
that's an interesting
Yeah.
like segue as far as
Yeah.
like the chapters of this, which is, so you're at Stanford. Have you finished school before you actually sold your company at 24, or were you still in school?
I finished my undergraduate degree.
Yeah.
And then I dropped out of the master's program. So like right out of school, I was either going to do my PhD at Princeton.
Mhm.
I think I threw away the accept. I just like,
You threw it away?
I should have took a picture of it. I was like, man, that would have been kind of cool. Because like, no, I was like a good student, like a graduate with honors and distinction, was doing like research projects. Because I just didn't, that was what I thought I was supposed to do. Like, I was just good at school. So like, I
Mhm.
like just do more school. And yeah, I mean, basically I got kind of the entrepreneurship bug where I ended up running the entrepreneurship club at Stanford. So I was a co-president there. And it was just kind of like a crazy time at Stanford where like one of the freshman mentees I had co-founded DoorDash. Evan.
Seriously?
Yeah. I'm just like, fuck, like, you gotta mentor me, bro. Yeah, this guy's Stanley. Like Evan Spiegel was a year younger than me. He's the founder and CEO of Snapchat. The Instagram guys are a couple of years older. So just like, again, I think it goes back to like just seeing my dad being an entrepreneur. Like,
Mhm.
it was straight up like these random motherfuckers who were at frat parties that I was with are like straight up real billionaires.
Right.
And you're just like, oh, like this shit is like possible.
Yeah.
I think it's, so that was just like the time that I was at Stanford. So I was either gonna join Facebook as a software engineer pretty early, right? Like I got a
Yeah.
Facebook offer, just like 2011, so like pre-IPO, would have
Right.
been pretty good. Do my PhD at Princeton, and I got into Y Combinator, which is like a kind of a prestigious startup incubator.
Mhm.
Like Sam Altman, the CEO
Yeah.
of OpenAI, was like he ran it for a while, but like a lot of like if you just Google Y Combinator, it's like kind of like the most prestigious startup thing in Silicon Valley. Like Stripe, Airbnb, Dropbox all came out of Y Combinator. So I got into that program, and it was like $170,000 to like start your company, like to like get 7% of your company. And at the time I was like 21, 22. I thought it was infinite money at the time.
Right.
I was like, oh shit, I get to like just kind of hack with my 2 other Stanford buddies, and like we get some money, like $170,000 of cash to like just make a startup. I mean, I feel like that couple of years of just like grinding and how hard it is actually to make a company is probably the
Mhm.
most useful as an entrepreneur.
What's
But that was like my first dip into entrepreneurship.
What's interesting, because like my first dip into entrepreneurship was through tech. Like I built a crowdfunding site.
Okay.
Like, and my first investment was from a private equity group out of Park City, which is why I'm in Utah.
Huh.
And I built a crowdfunding site. So I had a group of engineers, or, obviously guys that were just building the site. So it was like UX, UI, a couple other guys. I was building it. But that was a year and a half of just grinding it out in like a shitty little office with a couple guys trying to figure out, how do we do
PE
this?
Guys were backing you as a seed stage startup.
Yeah, because I had this idea. So the idea was we had been working on this like nanotechnology communication which was interesting. It was a particulate that you could essentially hide within like a spray can or something like that. So you could do covert comms and or embed into like low vis type of communications. And they had brought me in to do some dev work on it because I knew something about, I was a comms guy.
Yep.
And
how long were you out of service for? Like
I was still in.
Okay.
I was like working on it and I was still in and I was like working on it.
Yeah.
And, but my idea was like, hey, there's all this like rich experiential, startup ideas and these great ideas that are coming out of the military because the GWAT, but most of the time it's big corporations would essentially just go out on the ground and they would just essentially just steal intellectual property from the operators because operators would say, I need X, Y, and Z to make myself more successful. And then that company would just vacuum it up and go, hey, what other things do you guys have? So they were essentially doing R&D on the battlefield and then stealing guys are basically IP. Yep. So the idea or the concept was, hey, you're, operator X, you've got an idea. How do you protect your intellectual property and how do you get it funded? Because all these other companies are essentially just taking it for free and they're using all of this pre-existing experience as R&D and they're just stealing it. That's what they're doing. Yep. So my idea was like, hey, now if we had a Kickstarter for these type of ideas, well, now we can try to get these things funded through crowdfunding, but more importantly, we could run a crowdfunding engine on the backside of a private equity firm. So we could scrape the good ideas.
See the theme of helping the country.
Yeah. So we could like go and approach these guys and say, well, actually, this is a great idea. Let's help you take this and then we'll invest in it. Yep. So that was essentially, that was the concept. Yep. And they were like, that's a great idea. We should do it. And that's how I got funded.
Can you guys, I don't know.
You guys just shooting the shit or what? Killing it? Cool.
yeah. I was just like trying to focus, but like, I think we're pros, but like, yeah. Anyways.
But your startup, you get invested in. My startup, like I had 18 months of like a baptism in how do you just grind it out because I didn't have enough money. So it was
how much
not.
Did you raise?
500.
Okay.
But I mean, you know how fast
You're
you
full
can.
Grown ass man with like an engineering team. Like we were just coding this ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. Like I was like literally 21. Like it was just like this is like college dorms type too. Like I got infinite money now.
Yeah. But it's very similar because like it was here, throw you in, swim. That was it. There was no like safety. There's nothing. It's like you succeed, great. If you fail, great. Who fucking cares?
Yeah. No, I think it's like, I think that's where people do sink or swim. Like no one's out there to safety net you, right? Like at a certain point, if you want to play a big boy game, you want to be a tech entrepreneur, CEO, founder, make $1 billion company. Like you got to go make it happen yourself ultimately. Yeah. So I think it's like a good lesson where like you think that there's like institutions or venture capitalists or PE people and like coach you. It's like, they'll coach you a little bit, but like, yo, you got to make it happen. Here's a little bit of money, but like you figure it out.
Well, and I think that's a good thing because what that is you're actually looking at attrition in its natural form. You're saying, we'll give you money. If you can do it, you actually have something there. Yeah. But if we don't have anything else, like money is a very important variable. Don't get me wrong. It's a very important variable. But if money alone will not get you to where you need to go. Actually, I think you could probably, if you were to scrape the last, we'll say 95 to 2024 today, how many startups in Silicon Valley have been started and failed compared to the ones that have been successful?
Yeah.
How many do you think it is?
9 to 1 failure, like 90% failure rate.
Yeah,
Probably.
100%.
Yeah. No,
Like-
it's just like, yeah, it's like, I think when people probably like hear us say that money's not a constraint, they're probably like, fuck these rich dudes, right? But it's, I think it's just really true that like, I don't think you or I are constrained by capital. It's straight up like good ideas, good talent, good problems to solve. And it's like I don't know how to like explain that without coming off like arrogant, because like, yes, you need to like pay the bills and have a living, so like you're not stressed out about the next bill. But to actually build a valuable company, it's not about like more money does not solve other
Mhm.
people's problems.
No, in some ways it can actually be a limiting factor,
Yeah.
which and I've learned that over the last, several years. At this point, I think, the company, last year we were just under, 400 million top line. And the most important ingredient is always going to be how the team itself works together to solve problems. That's it. Like, it is the most important ingredient. So whether we take the time machine back to my garage, we say, okay, well, like grinding it away in my garage, and my first year in business out of my garage, I did like 1.3, we'll call it 1.35. And that first year, I didn't pay myself a dime. More importantly, I started the company with no debt, basically, because I was coming right out of the agency, and like I'd been able to save a lot of money because I'd been deployed all the time. So I started the company with no debt, and I had, a condo like in Seattle. I had like $100,000 I'd been able to shove in a shoebox in the bank, and then by the end of the first year, I had been working 3 jobs. So like my startup, my first startup, which is the crowdfunding site, being still in the National Guard, I was still at the agency at the time too. So I had like 3 jobs, and I had started this, coffee company because I was like super interested in coffee and I wanted to do a coffee company. So I was like having all these jobs. I did $1.3 million in top line. And I ended that first year. I sold everything that I owned, and I was in debt on all my credit cards because I needed the credit from the credit cards to buy inventory. So, by the way, that's what it takes. Like, this isn't for the faint of heart. Like, this isn't for the weak in stomach. Like, starting with a nest egg and property first year, ending the first year with no property, basically no possessions, no money, and then in debt all the way through all of your credit cards, which is one, it takes a semi crazy person with an inordinate amount of confidence to do that. And 2, it also, you have to live on the precipice of fear all the time. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's survivorship bias, right? Like, you could have blown up.
Yeah.
You could have been homeless, essentially, right? If you just levered up everything, you could have lost everything.
100%.
Yeah.
I think that's what it takes, though. Like, I think every one of these so-called rich, crazy guys, they've had to make really big decisions in their life where they could have lost everything.
Yeah. I actually believe that.
Yeah.
I feel like the best and some wisest people I've met have felt this sense of ego death or literal death or economic death to some extent, right? Like, you need to have like seen the bottom of like going bankrupt or not making payroll, or like maybe like someone trying to kill you. So you just know how deep you need to like really grasp and fight for. I feel like a lot of kids I talk to now, they want to be a startup entrepreneur. It's like, dude, you guys are so soft. Like, you don't know like how fucking dirty and hard this shit is, right? Like you like stare death in the face, whether it's like economic death or like literally physical death, someone trying to kill you, level of death. But even like, I think from like the celebrity content creation side, I feel like with someone like Jake Paul, like he's been canceled / the celebrity is fleeting type of a death.
Yeah.
And like, I felt like when I first started doing business with Jake when he was 24, like people might see him as like this online character who's very brash and like an entertainer, but he very much saw potential deaths in his career. I felt like that was like understood wisdom around people like that,
Mhm.
right? Like most child stars just like never have that closeness to death to like realize that like they need to be serious about their craft. And so if you can catch that, and this is not to just celebrities, but just to anyone, the earlier you can catch that notion of actually understanding what death, again, like metaphorical death or like
Yeah,
actual
of
death
course.
is, um, I think you have a much clearer sense of how to operate, how to do business. Because you don't get caught up in like the bullshit of the pretense of wealth, the pretense of value creation. You just like know truly what is of value, and then you just focus on that.
Yeah, look, I look back on it, especially the early years, in the sense of like there was no money coming out of the business.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't take money out of the business and put it in the accounts. I mean, Matt, myself, and Jared, we made multiple decisions early on that we didn't pay ourselves. It was going right back into the business all the time. You're reinvesting in the business, and those are lean. Those are those are lean years. It also teaches you future reference, which is like right now is a really, really good example. Like the economic conditions in the United States and the direct to consumer market is tough. Like it's a battle. It is, from a business perspective, like you're getting up every day and you're going to war trying to create customers. That's what you're doing.
Yep.
And if you have the context and understanding as to how difficult it is and how difficult it can be, you can always tighten your belt back. Like you can always like ratchet it back in.
Yep.
But if you don't have the dexterity of understanding how tough things can actually get, it's going to be hard for you to make adjustments in the business. I think right now, and I've said it multiple times, right now, this economy, what we're looking at right now, the businesses that survive, like the businesses that are alive and thriving in 25 and that have been around for a while, those are the businesses that are going to make it.
Yep.
The rest are going to attrit.
Yep.
I see them all. I see them a lot. I've even just in the last 10 years, man, I've seen a lot.
Talked shit about other people's business. Open up the pod.
Yeah. And by the way, it's like, I see it in the context of guys get used to a lifestyle, right? It's like, man, I lived in a shipping container on a fucking cot. It's going to be really hard to intimidate me.
Yeah.
It's going to be really hard.
That's really good strength. Like that's what I pride myself onto too. Like I don't need anything.
Yeah.
Like if you really believe that and can live like that, you're unstoppable. Like take everything away from me, I'll still fucking fight. I don't care.
Same.
I don't need the toys.
I don't need it.
It's fun.
I need the complexity of the problem.
Yeah.
That's what I need. Like I need two things. Like truly I need two things. I need my family and the complexity of the problem.
Yeah.
That's it. So it's like I get to get up every day and like solve the Rubik's Cube, which is actually way more interesting and way more complex than a Rubik's Cube, but you'll get the analogy. Like I get to play the game every day and then go home and see like, a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old and 3 women and 2 dogs that really appreciate and love me. And I get to like play that game every day. I can do that in the middle of fucking nowhere.
Yep.
It doesn't matter to me.
Yep.
So it's like, it's very difficult, especially when it's like put into context. And I was talking to one of my other friends about this. It's like he purposely flies coach everywhere he goes. He never flies first class. He never flies private, even though he can. But he's like, I always like to remind myself what I can do versus like what I'm capable of versus what I can do.
It's nice to charter sometimes. I'll put it that way. Efficient.
I thought it was super interesting though. I was like, because I was asking him, I was like first class? He's like, no, coach. I don't even go to the Delta Lounge. I was like, man, it's like
keeping it real raw.
Yeah, it's solid.
Yeah.
It's super solid.
Yeah.
I say, you see, like you're at Stanford, but you get into biohacking, like that becomes your next move. You're like, this is just interesting or what?
It's kind of a hobby. Like now it's like kind of such a funny like insight, but like I think when I was like 24, I was like in my mind, I was like, hey, I need to make myself smarter and get any competitive edge as possible, because I just saw the parallel distribution of outcomes from like if you're Uber, you're literally like 100 times richer than if you funded Lyft.
Right.
So like such slight incremental advantages would have such a dispersion of outcomes. So I was in the mindset of okay, like that is just the reality of just parallel distribution of value creation and value capture. If I can like make myself a little bit more productive, a little bit smarter, a little bit more efficient, I should be able to set myself up to be a better Silicon Valley tech entrepreneur / capitalist /
Mhm.
business builder. So that was like just like the personal motivation, just like okay, I want to just like be more competitive. And then I think the second insight was just realizing that like we have such, and this is like fairly early at the time. This was like circa like 2014, where we didn't have all these like equipments to like track your blood glucose, all the
Right.
just the biometric stuff. And I just really remember that like we know so much data about our houses, our cars, our computers, right? Like you have like real time dashboards of CPU usage.
Mhm.
We have like no information. We just have like a maybe an annual snapshot of your bloods that you go to the doctor with, and you're like, just take some vials, and like you just see some snapshot of stuff. So I felt like there was an opportunity to just apply Silicon Valley engineering techniques to like human performance. So that was just like the foundational core motivation of like just getting to be a hobbyist, and then realizing that like I should just make like an organization to like do this and make it sustainable. So that company ended up being what's called Ketone IQ. And honestly, I think it was like one of the best things that has ever happened to me. Because I think if I didn't go down the biohacking route, I'd be very much just stuck in like San Francisco, just in like straight coastal elite computer stuff.
Right.
Like I wouldn't have like seen America. I remember like honestly, like one of the coolest experiences of my career was we earned a $6 million contract with SOCOM, and as a part of that, to basically test and develop ketone drinks for special operation use cases in extreme environments. You can like look up the contract on, like the government contracting
Yeah.
website. So like it's just like out there. And one of like the coolest things that was a part of it is I got to visit Fort Bragg, the CAG compound,
Mhm.
like Fort Benning, Dam Neck. Like I just got to see like literally all of like I just visited all the military bases.
Right.
And I was just like, this is like my childhood dream of like looking at like playing Counter-Strike and like I'm meeting the people in the video game, like with helicopters, like tanks and whatever the shit is on these compounds. But two, I realized that like it's like weird to say now because I feel like it's just like it's a part, like a really strong core of my personality now, but I didn't really understand like patriotism or like the love of America. Because again, if you like grow up in LA in Palos Verde, which is like an upper middle class neighborhood, you go to Stanford, like a elite college,
Right.
you don't see like any of like what actual like why are people proud of America, right? Like I felt like especially during that time, and I think it's better now. Like Silicon Valley almost prided itself on like Google not wanting to build like AI for like DoD,
Right.
but they would do it for like other countries or
Right.
other projects, and it was just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and it was like we're all Americans. Like all my family and all my shit is in America. Like I want America to be the best possible country. And I think actually meeting like real human beings who are like, I don't know what they call them, like knuckle dragger, like guys who were like just like actually on the front lines killing
Yeah.
bad guys. I'm like, damn, these people actually love this country. And I felt like I didn't ever meet people like that
Mm.
in my like super random like computer science
Right.
Silicon Valley world.
Yeah.
And I think that was a very foundational experience in terms of just like growing as a human being and as an American, being like, oh, like America, like there are people that actually love this country, believe in this country, and are like ready to bleed and die for this country. I'm like, wow, this is super interesting. I think that got me down this like a whole different path of just getting much more interested in that whole side of the world.
Well, it's interesting to me because I have my perception. You've lived way closer to it and in it of what I would say is the culture of Silicon Valley and how it's somewhat helped define even capital markets and private equity and investment, specifically in, we'll call it like post 97 till now. And, like this like coastal elite And it's not as if they don't think about, we'll call it middle America or more patriotic Americans. I shouldn't say that. It's not as if they have a negative perception. That's not necessarily all it's they don't even think about them because they're so isolated within an echo chamber of what they're doing. They think everybody is like them.
Yeah.
And then middle America and or patriotic Americans are like, what the fuck are they talking about?
Yeah.
Who are those people? They don't exist, right? They're like, you have to go to the zoo to see them. You have to go to Ohio.
Yeah. Ohio's exotic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, my point is like, I have my stereotypical views on what I would say is the Silicon Valley community,
Yeah.
but it's built on, I would say, a few different fact points. So I went to Facebook and I spoke at Facebook like 7 years ago, and I walked around the Facebook campus and like talked to people, and they were just fucking amazed how like people like me even existed.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Like, that was me like 7 years ago. It's like, oh shit, like it's not a video game character.
Right. Yeah, it's wild
Yeah.
because there's such a cultural difference and it's so isolated. And I'm somewhat fascinated, so I have to like make a what I would say is like a lighter reference point, because I think if you watch Silicon Valley, that show on like HBO,
Yeah. It hit too close to home sometimes.
Seriously?
It literally was like,
that's what I was gonna ask you.
like I kind of hit close to home because it's true. Like a lot of that shit is actually kind of true.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that was my question. It was like, so how close did that hit? And now you just answered it, but like, because watching Silicon Valley, and it's like super funny. So I thought it was like hilarious series, but then you actually living there and being within that community, like how accurate actually is that outside of like the comedic beats?
I think it's pretty accurate, actually.
Really?
Like just I just remember some of the scenes, like the notion of resting investing.
Yeah.
Like you sell your company to like a big company. I mean, I was in that spot where like I sold my first company like as a 23-year-old, and I got like first kind of real money for the first time, and I hated my fucking life. And I was like getting paid. I was literally buying shit and like learning scuba diving. I was like just doing like vacations and trips and learning like scuba dive. I was like got my advanced PADI scuba license because I was like so bored. But I was getting paid. I was like the golden handcuffs, the rest invest notion of like, I think one of the characters was like chilling at the Huli or the Google of that show. I mean, that's like just real. I think there's a lot of smart people who are just getting paid too much to sit there. And they're like all like, I'm like, a lot of my friends now are like senior directors at all these companies, from the OpenAIs, the Googles, and the Facebook. They're like, yo, I work like 10% of the time. Like I get paid like high 6-figure, 7-figure. I just literally, like, people are like, oh, we don't want to review the project proposal. Like, let's review it in Q2, which is like 3 months away. Like, we're just chilling. Just like, don't push too hard. I'm not gonna name the company, but it's like straight up like people are like, yeah, I'm getting paid a lot, but like I'm kind of depressed because like I'm not really doing anything. I'm only working 10% of the time. Can I like consult and do a side project? Like that. Like when I was at, I mean, this is probably too much. This is like long enough ago, but like, I was at Groupon. And I was hacking with some, like at the Twitter office on weekends with like other smart friends because we're all just bored.
Right.
Like we were just straight up building apps at the Twitter office, drinking free Twitter stuff. And that was just real. That was just like what we're doing.
Right.
And I think some of the other tropes around like alpha dogging VCs, like the more of a dick you are to VCs, it oftentimes works. Like I remember some of those scenes. I was like, damn, that kind of actually is true. Like there was this like weird nerd alpha FOMO game to play. Like I'm a fucking Olympiad math champion. Like I'm fucking way smarter than you. I'm gonna like this. I think that's like Sam Bankman-Fried actually.
Yeah.
Like I'm MIT, super smart, Jane Street trader. I'm way smarter than you. Like give me your money or like too late.
Right.
Like obviously he did that to like the biggest. Now he's in jail, deservedly so. But I think a lot of those games are actually the games being played. Like because it's so hard to select if you're in that ecosystem, because it might be 90% chance fraud, but the 10% chance that it's not fraud and you miss the next Facebook,
Right.
that's like 1,000x return.
Right.
Like the math actually checks out from like a portfolio perspective. So like a lot of these like weird dynamics that you see on a TV show, it's like laughable. It's like, well, as we spoke in the beginning of the conversation, right? Like 90% of companies will fail, and that's okay because you have a 90% loss rate. But if you have that one that makes 100x, you still got a 10x portfolio,
Right.
right? Your $1 turns into $10, even though 9 out of 10 are frauds or zeros.
Yeah, and it's like you don't even have to be what I would say is good at math to understand the way that those investments actually are structured from, we'll say a diversified tech investment portfolio as far as your gambles are concerned, and then how much money you have to spend against the type of technology and the individuals with an off-ramp or an exit strategy. You can play the game relatively conservative, and you could also make a lot of bets, lose a lot of fucking money, but also win. It's not actually it's Crayola math. Actually, it's not that complex.
So that's why I think when people see like the idiocy of some of the capital allocation, it's like, yes, some people vaporized money, but like again, you don't luck box into deploying $1 billion of capital. Like there is some method to the madness, and like that strategy will like probably worked at some point, and that's why they have that much capital to allocate, right? If you're so smart, you go deploy $1 billion, right? Like you go find the money for someone to give you. So like that's where it's like I think there's so much truth to it. I think there's a lot to make fun of, but it also works, and I think that's like the counterintuitiveness of some of the weird ecosystems. But yeah, like I think I just came in from San Francisco, just literally just stopping in Salt Lake to hang out with you, and now I live in Miami now, and I was just doing like tech dinners, and it was like so endearing to me that there were these startup founders in their like startup hoodies with their like company logo. They were like super awkward, and they were just they could only talk about their company and their little project, their little AI widget or little SaaS thing, and they're like all shy. Whereas like it was so endearing because like in Miami or LA or New York, it's just like everyone's Gucci'd out. They're talking about, oh, come on, my boat or your boat this weekend. Which club? Are we going to the F1 Grand Prix this weekend? Are you going to the Carbone thing or which paddock thing are you going to go to? So in some sense, I actually loved Silicon Valley in that sense, where like I think with all the bullshit aside, I think the people there earnestly are smart and want to build. And I think we need more people that actually want to build. They're a little bit nerdy, a little bit weird. I think we can evolve their patriotism and in terms of like building the right thing. And I think there's like a big growing movement there. I wouldn't say that like, I think that the maturation of the ecosystem in terms of like the political breadth and just like people building what's called like American dynamism, right? Like all the Andurils and like the hardware autonomous drone companies and the public safety companies. I think I see a lot of good progress there, where like I think we realize that America is in a competitive global market amongst geopolitical other players who are playing their game. So I think I'm generally optimistic that we want more Silicon Valley smart big brain people building good stuff for us.
Yeah, I think my desire, I think, because I don't disagree with like you need the best and the brightest, which is kind of trite just to say, but you actually need some really smart, introverted, socially awkward people that are working on the most advanced pieces of technology that humans can quite literally invent. I would say we collectively need to continue to be the beacon of opportunity, right? That like, because that I think from a North Star that's where you do pull the best and the brightest internationally, because if you're managed under a tyrannical regime and you're put into a social caste system where your work is just going to be harvested and then pulled into what I would say is the big ambiguous community, whatever that might be, sucked into the government instantly, and there's not a carrot. I don't think you're going to attract the best and the brightest. I really don't. I think that like my thoughts on that though are, and which would be an interesting topic for us, because it's a little bit concerning to me that these technologies they're owned by private companies and or public companies, public or private, depending. And our politicians don't have a really, I don't think they have a great understanding as to how they're
They have
being
no idea
developed.
what's
They have
going
no
on.
idea.
Yeah.
So that's concerning to me, because I think from global community and from a country specifically, if you have a private company and or a public company that's keeping everything within closed doors, and the public doesn't have necessarily a decision of how the technology is going to impact our country, that could be pretty dangerous. Like, so from a personal perspective, when you think about Terminator, right? So we'll just like go into the most like salacious AI
I
topic
mean, that's gonna be built.
imaginable.
That's gonna be built like now, or like will soon be built for sure.
You think?
I mean, Anduril got that Air Force program to make autonomous fighter jets.
Right. Yeah.
You have a little. I mean, it's relatively trivial to turn it into a little humanoid, right? There's like companies called like Figure and a number of other. We're in early investors. A company called Physical Intelligence raised $70 million just doing foundational models for physical robotics, right? So like all these models are being trained right now. So yeah, just apply it to some hardware, a chassis. Like yeah, we're gonna have all this stuff. To me, it's like we're not gonna stop it.
So you're not going to stop it, but you're obviously a smart guy. Like dive into it a little bit deeper. Than, what are your concerns? What are your like thoughts and feelings directly referencing this?
I think where the American system is great, to your point, is that we've historically been able to attract the best and brightest from the entire world, right? Like, I think you talk to any average Chinese academic or European academic, like, where do you want to live? They all want to like live here. And I think we have to. I think that's like literally the flywheel, the hack of America is that everyone wants to be here. Like we just have like this cultural and lifestyle, this American dream that is like the best propaganda tool, or just like the best cultural tool that has been invented in like modern history. And then I think two, I think where American capitalism has been very good is that you allow people to compete. I think it's a very almost communist system, or like a Chinese, like a party-led system, where it's like, hey, we want like this a central Politburo to decide, like, hey, we're going to allocate here or there. So I think it's straight up like a competition. Like I don't know if history has ended where a democratized, capitalistic, competitive system with a little bit of like market chaos long term is better than party-led, centralized, top-down, state-down driven innovation.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like I could see a world where it's like American capitalism has been a dominant power for the last 100 years. But maybe if it's like, hey, you have AI unlock, you have robotics unlock, and a central power saying, hey, we're gonna fuck like social media apps, we're gonna put $7 trillion into AI. Like basically, the Chinese Communist Party can do that. Xi Jinping can just be like, hey, everyone stop working on everything else. We're gonna just push everything into like hardware and robotics infrastructure. Maybe that is like a better system in terms of competitiveness, in terms of like just nation power, nation state battle. Like to me, right? Like all my stuff is in America. Like I'm American. So it's like, okay, well, we don't know what is the better model. It is a straight up competition. So like our people, our values need to compete with other values and other models. And then when I say like we need to keep attracting the best and brightest, I think it's like this weird sense, especially in like this day and age now, where it's like there's a lot of illegals crossing the border and whatnot. And I think that, to me, I think when my parents came to America, like we assimilated into like American values and American culture. I think it's like a relatively recent phenomenon where it's like you fly your old country's flag as like your primary identity, even though like you moved your entire family to America. Like it's weird. It's like you left your old country and culture because you think that American culture is better, but like you are more proud of your old country and culture than like the current one that you chose to join.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think is like, it's just like, again, another open debate that's like happening in our society right now. That's like just very, hot button issue. So to me, it's like, how do we keep attracting the best and brightest? I think there is some value to like having some assimilation into like American values and American culture. Otherwise, we're going to just be like a weird hodgepodge of like, tribal, ethnic, whatever groups killing each other in this country. Like that's not a good organization, right? Like we run corporations. Do you want like half of your corporation like hating you or like tearing each other apart? Like that's just not going to be a strong entity, right? Whether it's a company or a nation state. So I think it's like, in some sense, like if I could be prescriptive, it'd be like, yeah, like let's continue to get the best and brightest, but like we got to encourage / foster like this notion that, hey, like you're joining America. You're on Team America. If you don't want to join Team America, it's fine. You don't have to come.
Right.
Right. And so like, to me, it's like, I feel like a lot of people want both. It's like, you can come, but like you can rep your old country. Like, no, like it's not like it's a little weird.
It is very strange. It's a strange phenomenon, which is like, that's fine to take pride in your heritage. Like I have zero problems with that.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you're on Team America. Like that's like you're wearing the jersey.
Yeah.
You're on the field. Like that's what you're doing. That's who you're going to work playing for every day. And it's like, if we're not here to build a better country, which I mean, I think we definitely agree on that, where it's like we're really here to invest in our communities, our companies, our people. How do we build infrastructure? How do we really build and represent not only the company, the city, but then the country as a whole? How do we make it better? Like I'm not interested in making Ireland better. Right. It's not that I don't care about Ireland. That's not it. I care about America. That's what I care about, because this is where I live. This is where I'm raising my kids. This is where I'm paying my taxes. Like, this is what I care about. And that's fine. That's not xenophobia. That's just like being, I think, a rational human being, like living in their community, saying like, I care more about Salt Lake, the city that I actually live in, than Austin, Texas. It's not that I am devaluing Austin. I'm just saying this is where I live.
Yeah. And I feel like it's like political. And I don't think it needs to be. Like, it's weird to me that like that it is somewhat political, or like a culture war topic. And it's just like, we're here. And so I think and again, to me, I think what has been great about the American system is that, like, I don't know if you want random government bureaucrats. I know that you know a lot of politicians. Like, do I really want them telling like super nerds how to regulate AI models and like robotics? Like, these people like don't really know what the hell's going on either. Like, okay, like, are we gonna like launch murder robots randomly? Like, okay, like, I think we have like good property rights, personal safety rights. Like, I'm just very skeptical around unappointed random people that aren't educated, aren't smart, like making random policy decisions for like what people can be building or not building, right? So like so I think, to me, it's like, of course, like government is going to be the oftentimes like largest customer if we're going to, like, we are making military autonomous hardware, and we should be, because that will be the next level of warfare. Like, we do not have it. You think our adversaries are not building this? They're going to be building it. It's a ratchet of intellectual and it's a ratchet on military hardware. Like, we're not going to be like, hey, let's go back to fighting with spears and shields. So like, if you believe that, then like, okay, you're gonna get taken over.
Well, yeah, I think it's like living in living in reality, like living in the current reality, and more importantly, it's like living in the reality of the future versus living in the past. And I think part of this is like, we were having this conversation last week, I think, with one of my friends. We're talking about, he was talking about Ukraine and how they're going to see, for the first time in the history of warfare, autonomous drone against autonomous drone. And that changes for instance, in this circumstance, this changes the way wars are fought forever, by the way. So it's the implementation of belt-fed weapons into the battlefield. It's the implementation, more importantly, it's the advancement of what I would say is like firearms into the battlefield. Like that's the equivalent, or, you know, the, the Manhattan Project,
Yep.
right? This is the equivalent, and we're living in that time right now. And then you have a bunch of people that are essentially saying, we're going to continue to look at the wars fought in the past. We're not going to look at the wars fought in the future. We're going to continue to make the investments in the military infrastructure that we made in the past, because we're constantly fighting the previous war. This is a very doctrinally sound soundbite, which is America loves to fight the previous war, not the next war.
Yeah.
That's what they love to do.
Yeah. So I think what is my personal interest in this area? Well, I want to invest and back all the companies that are going to be building the future, right? Like, it's beyond my pay grade to make policy and whatnot, right? Like, I'm not a politician or a policymaker.
Yeah.
But it's like, like, I know you probably have more of a direct line there than me, but in general, right? I want like, if you were making some of the decisions, that would probably be a stronger country, right? But yeah, I think just like my role as a business person and a venture capitalist, like, yeah, I can't become a billionaire by trying to like take over oil that Rockefeller did 200 years ago, right? I got to figure out like the next place. And I think the easiest way that I think about doing early stage and venture investments is that if you think that just think about things that are going to be inevitable, and just try to make bets in those areas. Right? Do we think that in the future there will be autonomous Terminator bots or not? Probably. Well, it's just like, I don't think people are explicitly saying, hey, I'm going to make a Terminator robot. But like, am I going to try to invest in every single adjacent foundational model, hardware manufacturer, drone developer, software manufacturer? Sure, let me just like index as much of that space as possible.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and then eventually, maybe if I earn the right to like push policies in some direction, like, that'd be fun to have that conversation. But like, we start somewhere.
Yeah, and you started with, well, I mean, the product that we have here on the table, which is not going to sound, it's going to sound like a commercial, but it's not, which is like, take me through the advancement of that product, and then why does it exist?
Yeah. Yeah, I think in some sense, ketone IQ ketones are very advanced, but also very primitive. So humans have been able to use ketones or go into ketosis since the dawn of humanity. What is ketosis? It's like when you're fasting, when you're not eating, your body only stores about a day's worth of sugar or carbohydrates in your liver called glycogen. And your brain uses a lot of glycogen. So do we all just starve to death after one day of not eating? Well, I think a lot of fat Americans probably think so, but no, we can survive a few days without eating very, very easily. And that's just how we evolved. What happens there is that your body runs through its glycogen or carbohydrate reserves, and it starts using its fat stores. But fat are big molecules. So the body has a mechanism called ketogenesis. It converts these fat molecules into ketone bodies. And ketones are very energetic. They cross the blood-brain barrier, and they've essentially been this like survival super fuel that humans have been able to tap into in like these starvation circumstances. So fast forward into like modern era, when people were testing different energetic substrates for cells, looking at making space foods. So there's a bunch of research in the early 50s around just like fasting, different fuels. Can you feed astronauts going to Mars? What would you feed them? And people saw that ketones were a very interesting molecule. I think there's just like this very interesting early study where if you put sperm cells, I need to like find this paper because I referenced it a few times, but like these little swimmers, if you put like sugar, amino acids, and ketones, the sperm swim like the most vigorously when they're being fueled by ketones.
Really?
That was like interesting, like data point. And then two, there's a lot of early research on like sending mice up into space using ketones as like the fuel. So in the early 2000s, this was when General Pete Pace was the vice chairman, and I think as the vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs, he signed up on all the DARPA stuff. He actually came on board as a board observer and advisor to Ketone IQ. He, basically kicked off like this DARPA program to study super fuels to enhance soldier endurance during like extreme environments, right? Like I think you know better than me, right? Like oftentimes when you're deployed multi-day missions, your cognitive stress, your decision-making attrits over time. That original DARPA study looked at if ketones could be a super fuel to enhance decision-making and enhance endurance. And there was like a $10-20 million effort to get this initial program started. But like the original dose of something like this would have cost like $20,000.
Right.
Because to get to this type of molecule, you would have to purify crude petroleum product into the organic carbon chain of like the molecule that is consumable as like a chirally pure, or basically just make a version of a ketone that your body knows how to consume. So how we got involved is two things. One, bioengineering technology improved, where instead of doing crude oil purification methods, like chemical engineering methods, you could actually get engineered E. coli to ferment sugar into the right carbon molecules. So that was a big unlock in terms of efficiency of production. And the second part was cobbling together the IP research and the supply chain to actually bring this to market from like a $20,000 a dose to something that is now like $4 or $5.
Right.
So that's where my co-founder Michael and I started what's now called Ketone IQ to bring all that technology together into now one, something that we supply to DoD, but also we work with a ton of pro athletes. That's actually how I originally got to know Jake Paul. Like we were biohacking buddies.
Seriously?
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's honestly probably how we originally connected as well. Because I think we had a number of mutual friends. I think I got to know Mike Glover.
Yeah, Mike Glover. Yeah.
And then who was more on the business side at the time. But I think it was just like, visiting all these random military bases. Like, dude, like these SOF veterans and people in special operations. Like, I think there was a part of me is like just straight up like the 13-year-old boy. I was like, yo, the 10% of me that wanted to be a soldier, like every young boy, I was like, these are like the people that like I wanted to be like, and everyone thinks it can be like a Green Beret or a Navy SEAL, right? So I was like, oh, cool, like these are, it's just cool. But I think you quickly get over like the coolness, and it's like, hey, these are actually just good people, and I think that's where it's like a super long way of getting to like, why am I sitting here?
Yeah, it's interesting because Mike and I have been friends for so long, and then how we were introduced, and then you introducing me to other people that are involved in Ketone IQ, and we have so many different similarities because we talk about business, and like for those of you that this is the first time you've heard Jeff, we've talked pretty regularly for like the last year, and we talk about fucking everything for the most part. And we have like these super interesting conversations, and we'll like get hyper caffeinated, and we'll like slam, like we'll be fasting, like being like hyper caffeinated, drinking Ketone IQ and like talking about business for hours and hours. And to the point of which like we're probably both somewhat exhausted by the time we leave, but it's like really, really fun, which is part of the whole thing of like, Jeff's just like fun to be around. Like you're just like fun to be around. Like, because you're like super interesting. You've got a totally different perspective. And like, Mike and I talk all the time too. Well, Mike and I talk like every other day, but you're so far outside of our like cultural ecosystem. But at the same time, we have so many different similarities because like, where you grew up, where I grew up, they're so different. And we're both sitting here at this table, which I find fascinating just like in itself. But we look at the world very similarly. And like, you're like, roll up your sleeves, get shit done. Like, let's go to work. Let's fucking bust our ass. Like you have a work ethic and you have this desire to seek information and solve problems. And I think that transcends like whether you were born in, Akron, Ohio or Los Angeles or Northern Idaho or where the fuck you come from. like that person, this entrepreneur, is really fucking interesting. Like that, those people, they're fascinating.
Yeah.
Like Jeff invited me down to, what was that fight? Like, was that in Dallas?
Yeah.
Yeah. The last one was
Jake
in
versus
Dallas.
Anderson Silva.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah. And we had like a dinner with a bunch of other guys, and
Yeah.
like we were sitting around bullshitting. And then before that, like we had gotten together. This is where we met. It's like Chris Williamson, the guy that actually Newtonic, the guy that invented this, like in putting these people together and having dinner. We were just having this conversation where it's like, I would much rather sit down and have a 3.5 or 4 hour dinner with interesting people that are having fascinating conversations than like, you know, we were talking about it in the reference of like, what is the biohack? Like the true biohacks of the cornerstone of performance is like for me, it's like 7.5 hours of sleep, a really good workout in the morning, you know, fasting, caffeine, like supercharge my day and just work through the day. Like nothing is going to take the place of like 7.5 hours of sleep, a good workout, a solid, healthy, like well-balanced diet. Like nothing is going to take the place. So Adderall or psilocybin or any of these other things, it's just not going to take the place of those things. So the ultimate biohack is like things that are readily available for pretty much everybody, like comfortable, good night's sleep, like a bunch of air squats, maybe a run and some good sunlight. Like, holy shit, that's a biohack.
No, that's why I kind of cooled down a lot of this stuff. And I know that you're super fit, you run all the time. Because I feel like I meet so many of these like Silicon Valley biohackers, and they're just like weak and pasty and like, dude, I'll kill you. Like you could get like someone would kill you. And it's just like, it's like, yo, you're like nerding out on like your heart rate variability as like the metric you're optimizing for. I'm like, dude, you just don't look like you're fit.
No, they look translucent at times. You're like, actually, man, you might want to just get some more like actual sunlight versus taking a vitamin D supplement. Just saying. I'm just saying there might be some other benefits in there that we're not necessarily privy to as far as the science is concerned, but you should probably try it, which I think is like really interesting. Who's the guy? He's part of Ketone IQ. He's a former 10th group guy. Brian. That's right. Yeah. So like Brian was part of a mountain team back in Colorado. So he did a bunch of testing. I thought it was really interesting. One of the things I keyed on was at altitude or above altitude, the performance. Like, could you talk about that a little bit? Because no,
I think that's like some of the actual research output. I need to just, I think that like it's literally going to be published in peer review. So hopefully, I'm not going to scoop anyone's like academic publications, but I mean, I think one of the key endpoints, especially as relevant to that time era, is that my understanding, I've never been to Afghanistan mountains, but like oftentimes you're at like 14,000 feet, right?
Yeah.
Is that like the ref? Like
you can, I wouldn't say often, but yeah, you can be there for sure.
Yeah. So at that height elevation range, you get hypoxia or low oxygen. And it's well known that less oxygen, you make worse decisions, your reaction time drops. And one of the key endpoints we were studying is that because ketones are more efficient per unit oxygen for generating ATP, could you fuel with ketones and have better combat outcomes at altitude? So that was like a key endpoint. And we were doing a lot of this research with our research partners, IHMC down in Pensacola, Florida. So again, I like these random places that I wouldn't normally visit as a Silicon Valley guy. Like I would spend a lot of time down in Pensacola, and we would have these, like, I don't know if you played around with like these shoot simulator things.
Oh
like, the laser shoot simulators that are like kind of like 270 degree. Like we would have like I guess like modified Glocks and M4s
with like CO2 cartridges, so you get the actual like recoil and the whole thing.
Exactly. So I got to play around with some of that stuff, and it was like basically like we had an apparatus where it'd be fully enclosed in a hypoxic chamber, and we would simulate altitude, and then we'd run people through placebo versus ketones in terms of all of these outcomes for like shoot accuracy, reaction time, all of that stuff.
And it went up. Like performance went up.
Yeah. So long story short, it's good for a lot of these outcomes.
And so where are guys finding use now? Because I know, cyclists, endurance athletes, and things like that. Like where are they finding the usage for the product now?
Yeah. So I think like the the simplest, broadest way we think about it is that just it's like high performance energy, right? Like this is not caffeine, right? So stack it with Black Rifle,
Yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
perfectly great. But it's also like not sugar and any other energy. It's literally I think of it as like a fourth macronutrient. So you can use it as like just a very different energy source. Um, and a lot of people in Silicon Valley use it for like cognitive tasks, right? Like before podcasts or like during intense meetings, people like Ketone IQ, but also in terms of like pre-workout. So we have a 3-year partnership with Team Visma with Lisa Bike. I think that's like their new latest sponsor, but Team Visma Lisa Bike is like the best Tour de France team. They've won the last 2 Tour de France's. They have the best cycling team in the world. So it's not just like a sponsor like thing, which you
Yeah.
just pay. It's also like we're doing research with them.
Right.
So that's really cool. And yeah, I mean, like just like the first big combat sports athlete was Conor McGregor. Like that was like the part of the reason how I got to like just riff with Jake was because Connor was a big customer. Was like buying a bunch of the stuff. He's spending, I think, a lot of time in Monaco. So we're just sending a bunch of ketones into Monaco at the time. And like he like followed me on social media and stuff. And this was early 2021. And Jake Paul was trying to pick a fight with Connor. I don't know if you remember some of like those funny videos, but like Jake was like just trolling the hell out of Connor like 3-4 years ago. I was like, yo, this kid's funny. Like I wasn't a fan of Jake as a YouTuber because I just a different age range. But like I'm like a fan of him now as like an athlete. But I knew of him, but it was like, okay, cool. This like guy's like trying to pick a fight with Conor McGregor. Like this guy's funny. But like long story short, we both kind of ended up in Miami during the pandemic because the rest of the world was shut down. And I was like, wait, like you're trying to pick a fight with Connor. Like Connor like follows me on all this stuff. He's like a big customer of ketones. And like we just start like riffing on biohacking and like all this stuff. So Jake's actually like very, very sophisticated with his training camp and his protocols. Like all the biohacking toys, he has a warehouse in Puerto Rico. He's got like all the expensive toys.
Oh,
like his setup is more sophisticated. Yeah, I've been to the DoD compounds. This shit is, I was, like these are not the most well-funded things in the world. Probably, I don't know if he had a lot of toys. He had a decent amount of toys.
Oh, yeah.
But like his stuff is like very, I would say, more advanced than like NFL teams and all of that stuff because he just has it all for himself. But anyways, like we first were kind of biohacking friends, but then he realized that like as we're getting to know each other, he had 3 goals that year. It was box 3 times, which he ended up doing, do the splits and start a venture capital fund. And I was like, well, I can't push you to stretch. Like I don't know. I don't know if you can do this. I need to follow up with him. Can you actually do the splits now? I haven't checked.
Right.
But venture capital, like that's what I'm been building my career towards. Like let's like YOLO, fuck it. I mean, at the time it was such a like a flippant decision on my end because the venture capital business is essentially like building up assets under management to some extent, right? Like how can you raise outside LP money to like invest? Because I was investing at the time a lot of my personal money, and it's like, okay, I can scale up. Like I'm investing in these companies that end up being multi-billion-dollar outcomes. Like I'm good at this. I should scale up. He wanted to scale up, so we're like, okay, well, why don't we just jam this shit together and see what happens? And like honestly, like literally, the calculation I had in my mind was that, do I think I can raise twice as much money partnering with Jake than me alone? Probably.
Right.
Fuck it, let's do it. But I think. From that just like almost flippant serendipitous kind of like partnership, I think we just actually grew respect and like built like great track record in partnership together. So that's been a fun addition to this weird story of Geoff Woo that like we're still living.
Well, that's fucking great. I think that's part 1 of Geoff Woo. I've got to go watch my kids. So, Jeff, where can they find you?
Hit on all the social medias.
Cool.
My Instagram grew a lot this last year. So at Geoffrey Woo.
Cool.
Find me there.
And then Ketone IQ.
Yeah, Ketone IQ.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it, buddy.
All right.